Welcome to the CollectingCars.com podcast with Chris Harris and Edward Lovett.
Hello and welcome to another Collecting Cars podcast. I'm here today at Grove, which can mean only one thing in terms of the location of a motorsport team, and that is I'm at the home of Williams F1 with team principal, or are you CEO? What's your exact title?
It's both.
Both? He's got both. Well, his name's Jost Capito, and I think he is the most unsung man with the most interesting career in motor cars that I've ever met in all the time that I've worked in motoring or motorsport. So welcome, Jost, and I want you to talk me through your life in cars, basically. We're going to do a chronology because it's fascinating. Okay. His CV, let me give you a taster at the top of this show. If I told you he was involved in the development of everything from the 964 RS to the F-150 Raptor to the first Focus RS, maybe a bit of BMW M3 in the meantime. I mean, I've never known a CV like it. And he sits here modestly with his jumper on as if he's quite a normal bloke, but he really isn't. And now he's running a Formula One team. So let's just say he knows a bit about cars. Where did it start? We've all got a moment, I know when mine is, when I realised that the motor car was the love of my life. When did it happen for you?
I think for me, it was more motoring, not
because you two wheels as well.
Cars. Yes, because I started on two wheels, and I'm still really keen on motorbikes, and I love motorbikes more than cars. And I started racing enduro and motocross in the mid 70s. But then for me, I always wanted to work on engines, and my dream was I wanted to work for Paul Rosche at BMW because he was, for me, the engine guy. So then I went to Munich to university.
And what year was this?
What?
I'm not trying to give away your age, but so we talking
you can give away
we're
my
talking
age,
about
no problem.
We're talking about mid 70s, or are we talking early 80s?
No, I started racing in 74.
Okay.
So it's a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I went to Munich in 79 to university. And I always was driving Sundab at that time.
So before we get to you going to Munich, how good are you on a bike? Because I see you on the Facebook now and again. You're clearly still good on a bike. You love a bike. Were you a competitive rider? Did you get high up and then have a moment where you thought, I'm going to stop doing this? What happened?
Yeah, I started in 74, late 74, and I was German junior champion in 75 and 76.
There he goes. Amazing.
On the 50cc in 75 and 175cc in 76.
This is circuit racing, or is this?
This was enduro.
Enduro, yeah.
Enduro. I think I did the international 6 days enduro 4 or 5 times.
Oh, that's the legendary race, isn't it?
The best result was 79. I came third in my category.
Physically, how tough?
Well, that's quite tough. It's a 6 days. It's quite tough. Yes. So and then. I had to decide going to university. I was like semi-factory driver for KTM, for Sundab, and I raced Micro as well. So I had to decide.
Is this twin shock back then? Is it single shock?
It was the period when it changed from twin shock to single shock. I raced the Yamaha 125 in motocross. That was the first with the single shock.
Yeah.
That was the monoshock. That must have been 76. 75, 76, yeah. And then I had to decide what to do. I wanted to be an engine engineer because that was my dream. And I had to decide going to university, and that meant you couldn't race as a factory driver anymore. So I couldn't do the European Championship enduro, and I couldn't do the international 6 days because it all fell on the exams on the university. So I decided I wouldn't be the top. I wouldn't be world champion in anything on the motorbike, so I decided it's better to have a career as an engineer and follow this.
Mentally, you've always struck me as someone who is single-minded and strong. Was that a point in your life that you have any regrets about? Do you ever wonder what might have been? I mean, to have been that competitive and to switch it off?
I think when I went to school and also to university, I had two things. Either I work for Paul Rosche at BMW and become an engine engineer, or I go to Australia and run a sheep farm and become a farmer. These were my two things. So when I was at school, I opened an account in Australia, put a couple of Deutschmarks in there, because then you could go to Australia if you had 5 years plus account. So I had with a couple of Deutschmark Plus account, got the local news magazine sent by mail where it was the houses and farms were in. And then I decided, okay, and when university, I studied everything on cars and everything on farming. So I could design potato farming machines and tractors and all that. So because I go farming or I go automotive. And said, if I get my dream job with Paul Roche at BMW M as an engine engineer, I'll do that. And when I got the job, I did my diploma work there. I fought hard to get the diploma work at BMW M. And when they employed me during the diploma work and working on the engine performance development for the M3 engine, the first M3 engine, and that was the point to say, okay, that's my dream job. I forget everything. I canceled the account and said, Australia is done. This is what I do.
So when did you join BMW M? Or did BMW M even exist in 79? Was it...
Yeah, it existed
it did,
in 79.
It did. Okay.
Yeah. But I joined then, I did my diploma work in 84.
Yeah.
And then during the diploma work, I got employed.
Okay. So 84 is around the time that the E30 M3 is going to be launched. So it gets launched in 85, does it? Or is it 86?
I think it must have been 86 because my diploma work was the air exchange in the cylinder of this four-cylinder four-stroke
The S14 engine.
S14. That was my diploma work. So I was in charge then to create and to identify the intake and exhaust ports of the cylinder head. That was my.
So this is a very interesting engine for me. I'll express an interest because I've still got one. So I'm not trying to big up the values of them, but it's always very interesting making an engine that's going to be used in a street car for homologation that has to perform as a race engine and be developed as a race engine. How did you go about it? Because for me, it's very interesting because in the street car, I think the engine is quite disappointing. It's not very refined. It revs well, but compared to the six-cylinder engines that BMW had at the time, there was a lot of people like me thought this isn't quite as smooth. It doesn't feel as luxurious. But of course, we knew that it had the potential to rev so much higher. So how do you go about that? Are you just focused on what you need for the racing, or are you focused on what you think the street car needs, or are you trying to do both?
It was a bit of both. At that time when I started, there was only one engine development. It was not separated. There was the Formula One time at that time. So there was a Formula One engine, was a separate department, and that was a road department. So we focused on the road-going engines, and then of course that became the DTM engine as well. And at the time, I think after 2 years when I was there, it was separate. And then Wolfgang Hatz, he came from BMW AG, came to M and did the four-cylinder engine for the DTM on the racing development, and I did the road car development. And
Amazing.
I wanted to do the road car development because I found it always more exciting and more challenging to do a road car because of all the homologation, and you have much more responsibility to get the car and a road engine in or a car into production than to get two cars on the racetrack.
So did you do all of them? Did you do all of the engines? Did you do the 2.5 as well, or had you left by then?
No, I was in. I did the 2.5. That was the let's say the evolution.
Yeah.
And that was quite a challenge because the let's say the electronic, you had the flap to measure the air.
Yeah.
There was not a big one available enough to be suitable for the DTM.
Really?
So we had to do an Alpha N. And let's say regulated engine without that flap, and that for a road car is quite. So you had only the throttle opening and the revs, and you had to make that road going because it needed a certain number of road going cars to be sold.
Yes.
So for racing, that it's easy because you can every race you can adjust it, but for road going car you had to do this and working under all conditions. So that was the biggest challenge to do this. And I was in charge of that, and I also was in charge of the performance development of the 320 IS, so the 2-liter engine.
For Italian market.
Yeah, for the Italian market. And there the objective I got was it has to be the fastest 2-liter car in Italy beside the 2-liter Ferrari. And there was the Ford 2-liter turbo.
There was the 2-liter 308, wasn't there? They did an emissions Ferrari
Yes,
308, yeah.
But the highest challenge was to beat the Ford. Was it the 2-liter turbo they had? Was it the Scorpio at that time, or no?
Yes,
not
they.
the Scorpio.
No, the Sierra Sapphire.
The Sierra 2-liter turbo was then to beat by the 2-liter natural aspirated BMW.
Did you manage it?
Yeah, we managed it. And I think that was really it was even the better engine than the 2.3 because of course
I've heard
it was
this.
smoother.
Was it smoother?
Yeah.
Because the 2. I've owned both, and the 2.5 was exciting and it had more torque and it was faster, but it wasn't as sweet as the little 2. The nicest one I had was a little 2.3 without the catalyst, quite an early car.
Yeah.
This was a lovely car.
You should try to get your hands on the 2-liter because it could rev much higher.
What could it rev to?
We had it 7.6 and we reduced it to 7.6 because otherwise the performance of that engine would have been better than the 2.3. So we had to keep it a bit down. That engine was absolutely.
So what was it like This was the beginnings of BMW M. To be there at the time, you wouldn't have known you were building a performance icon brand. But looking back, in fact, every performance brand now that is owned by either Ford or by AMG, Mercedes, or Audi with the RS, they looked at BMW M as the beginning. That this is the one they all tried to copy. Yeah. How does it feel now, looking back? Paul Rocha, I mean, so you got to work with your hero to start with.
Yeah.
Were you aware it was special at the time?
For me, it was always special. I say BMW for me in the past always did the best engines. My father had BMWs, and I loved BMW, and I wanted to be at BMW. For me, they did the best engines. So, and also said, if you do the diploma work at BMW M, you are interested for everybody in the industry.
Really, you noticed that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was clear at that time.
So when was that the last thing you did at BMW M? Was the E30 M3? Did you move on after that, or where did you go straight away after that?
I was in charge. We were two guys, a colleague who became a friend, and me. We were two guys in charge of the performance development of all M cars.
Oh.
So that was just.
So did you do the E28 M5?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, I never knew that. Because I've still got one of those.
Yeah.
That's my favourite M car. I know it doesn't have the motorsport history, but I still think it's one of the most ridiculous road cars ever made.
Yeah, they were light.
It still feels fast now.
Yeah,
when I go in
it
this car now, with the little Michelin tyres on it, it's incredible to drive.
Yeah. And the best was then we had to do the winter test for the calibration.
Oh, well, that must have been a real shame going to all the sliding.
It was really good. And also the reliability test in Nardo.
Yeah.
So I've been in 85. I think I've been 9 weeks in Nardo with the M3 and the M5.
Wow. And no other car company was doing this then. No other car company was as committed to making very high performance cars from their ordinary models, were they? BMW began a trend, I think. If Volkswagen was the first company to put a big engine in a hatchback, really, in mass market, BMW always, if you read the car magazines back then, you always almost felt sorry for the opposition when the BMW arrived in the test. Do you remember? How can they compete with this M5? So E28 M5, I didn't realise you'd done that. Did you do the E34 as well?
I think that was later. Was later.
Yeah.
Because I moved on in, was it 89? 89 I moved on to Porsche. Yeah.
Straight to Porsche?
Yeah.
And in Zuffenhausen, or did you go straight into Weissach?
No, I went straight into Weissach.
Yeah.
Yeah, straight into the race department.
And what was your job title there?
Was like I was running the one makeups.
Yeah.
Because Ulrich Betz.
Yep.
He was at BMW, so I knew him from BMW, and then he was the head of R&D at Porsche.
Yeah.
And he asked me, he said, I'm looking for somebody who gets the Carrera Cup up to speed, because the Carrera Cup started in 90, and then I went there in October 89 to start the Carrera Cup up, and they got, Herbert Linge?
Yeah.
They got him back out of retirement to do that with me.
Yeah.
And I think that was a great experience because Herbert Linger was the fourth employee at Porsche at the beginning.
Amazing.
So, and he was the guy who proposed to Professor Porsche to buy the area in Weissach, because he lived in Weissach and he knew there is an area that is for sale. And then he went with Professor Porsche to the local government in Weissach and purchased the area and then built Weissach. So working with that guy
He knew everything.
He knew absolutely everything. That was absolutely amazing. And he was also, he started the ONS Staffel, so the safety. That was the first worldwide, really specialists on race safety.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from him there as well.
What about there's one connection here that I hadn't really realised until just now, thinking you're there to create one of the most ambitious one-make series ever seen. But of course at BMW you also saw previously the most ambitious one-make series, which was Pro Car.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to do with Pro Car?
No, that was gone when I arrived.
Was it? Because did you use any of what you'd heard about Pro Car costing BMW when you started doing the Super Cup? Because it must have cost BMW a lot of money, Pro Car. It looks to me like it must have cost them a lot.
Sure. But that was before my time.
Yep.
So we we could base the Carrera Cup. There was the 944 Turbo Cup.
Yep.
So there was something to base on. But the Turbo Cup was not done in the race department. That was done in the sales department.
Yeah.
And then with the Carrera Cup, it was taken into the race department. So the one-make cups went there.
So had the 964 Cup been, it might not have even been called the 964 Cup then, whatever, the 964 race car, had it been developed by the time you arrived, or were you involved in the development of the car?
It was mainly developed because if I arrived in October, but that was very much done by Roland Kusmal.
We'll come on to him now.
And Roland I knew from the Paris-Dakar, because I've done the Paris-Dakar from 83 to 86. And there we met all with the Porsche guys. Because
did you ride it yourself, or were you working? You didn't ride it yourself.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, he's done everything.
Yeah, I won the truck category in 85
Are
with
you
my father.
Are you actually Superman?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you get there, and of course Roland will love this, because Roland.
I knew him from the Paris-Dakar.
We know how much he would respect you hugely, because anyone that does that kind of rally raid for Roland obviously means you're a good guy.
Yeah, and we did it together. So we were together in the desert. So we became already their friends.
Yeah.
So and then going to Porsche and meet all these guys again, that was really great.
Like
so
coming home.
Coming back home, yes.
So so Roland has done most of the work already to make this cup, this 964 Cup, and the specification was what? It was only 10 horsepower more than the street car, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Like an airbox and not much else.
Yeah, and the exhaust, so mainly that. And the car was fully built in production. And that was why the intention was to keep it as cheap as possible and to keep it as close to production as possible for this then, and also make the car keep it easy to drive. So because you have a variant of drivers, if the car is easy to drive, you keep your field close. If the car is tricky to drive, like a high specific race car, the good drivers get even a bigger advantage than the not that good drivers, and then the field gets too far apart and you don't get really interesting racing.
I think you wouldn't have realised at the time that what you were doing actually was building the legend that would become all of the RS models for the last 35, 40 years. I mean,
then they didn't have RS for a while then, the Porsche.
From 73 to 1990.
Yeah, and then, I think must have been, 1990, yes. And then when we had the Cup car, some of the customers registered it for road.
Yeah. Oh, did they?
Yeah. And we didn't like to see that. But I've seen the advantage and say, why don't we do a road car based on the Cup car and call it RS? So, and it was a hard fight with the board to get this through, because they didn't see that you can sell the numbers. So I committed to a number so that they agreed they're selling it. We sold, I think, 4 times more. So we had the 2 versions.
Yeah.
We had the Club Sport version and the standard version, and the Club Sport was without any carpet inside, with a weld-in roll cage. So that also went then very well created the big opportunity for the Club Sport, that took then off as well with the 964.
Was that a problem making so many cars in motorsport? Did you have to make them in Weissach, or were they made over?
They were all built all the race cars were built on the production line.
Really? Even with the welded-in cage? How did you manage that?
Yes, so the body was built, then it went to Mata to weld the cage in, and it went back into production. So it got then the painting got all in production. So it was the quality was extremely high. So the whole painting inside was like a production car.
Look, when we come to discuss the Ford Focus RS later on, you do cause your production line managers some problems, don't you? Sometimes with your requests when we think about the Focus RS.
No, I always had a good relationship with the production guys. As if you want to build these cars in production, that the production guys are really proud to build high performance cars and to show what they can do outside building normal cars.
Yeah.
So working with them and keep them enthusiastic about it was really good, and they found solutions really to build these cars on the line.
So you've now got the 964 RS in production. That's around the time when I was consuming every car magazine. And the 964 RS remains a paradox for me, because right now, and for the last 15, 20 years, it's been considered one of the great Porsches. You know, it's the collectors want the cars because they're rare. The 964 shape, I think, has really registered as being beautiful again now. People really love the 964 shape. The car has a very unique sound, and it does drive beautifully. It's quite a unforgiving car. But the reviews, when the car was new, certainly in the UK, were terrible.
Yeah.
All the UK press hated the car. They said they couldn't understand why it was so stiff, the ride comfort, why the car was so noisy. It's so interesting. You go back and read the reviews, and the journalists couldn't understand. It's only 10 horsepower more than the standard car. Why would you do it? And now, of course, everyone thinks the car is amazing. But I always, and you can help me here, I always thought the difference was that in the UK our roads are so bad that the suspension just didn't work over here. But in Germany, I presume this wasn't a problem because the roads are so much better.
No, it was not a problem at all.
Yeah. Did you have one yourself? Did you ever buy one, or did you?
No, I never had a car that I developed. I never.
Unbelievable. Because you always had access to them, or you move on to the next thing?
No, I think if you are, for me, it was if you develop them when they go in production, it's an old car you're not interested in anymore, because you're already working on the next one, and you know the next one is so much better.
Yeah.
So that's why I never was, when the car got into production, for me the interest was gone. Okay,
so Roland Kusmal, who you got to work with, it fascinates me, because he's another one. He's a bit like you. He's one of these below the waterline heroes that no one knows about, but he really is the real deal, isn't he? As an engineer,
absolutely. He is the best race engineer I ever met, and the most capable of driving. You know, he keeps a record in the IndyCar around Weissach.
Does he really?
Yeah. So he is an amazing race driver. He is incredibly fast.
You said that before we recorded this, when you were at Sauber, you had some difficulties. What happened?
When we had difficulties with the setup, and I thought the engineers do not really know what to do, I called Roland and talked to him over the phone, and he gave me advices. So he's a brilliant guy, and not just as an engineer, as a person as well. He's just a fantastic.
When I went over to drive the latest GT3 Porsche, we still had some covering on it. We were driving through some villages down in those Swabian hills, and as you know, it's near Flacht around there. And coming towards us on a Friday morning, terrible weather, was a white with red stickers, nine. What would it be? The first GT3 RS, so a 996 GT3 RS, white with red, and it's Roland just going. And we stop him. Hello, Roland. He just holds out his tennis racket and goes, "I'm off to play tennis," and then just drives off.
Big tennis player. And a great experience with him was in '94 Le Mans. I was a team manager for Porsche in '94 when we won Le Mans, and he was the head engineer. So we solved all the troubles. We did the strategy together.
Was this a turbo? Was this the GT2?
It was the Dauer.
Oh, was the Dauer?
Yeah.
The year of you did the Dauer.
Yeah.
Now that was come on, Jost. That was a naughty car. I mean, how did you? So you were part of the body that managed to persuade the ACO that you could turn up with. Brilliant.
And that was we raced there against the Jaguars.
Right. Start from the beginning. Right. We need this now. The Dauer story. So just to clear up, so the 962, the 956, 962 have been dominant for so many years, and then Porsche goes back to Le Mans with a car that was effectively renamed. Tell us the story. It's fascinating. It's an amazing piece of clever thinking from Porsche.
Max Welty was the motorsport director at Porsche.
Yep.
And he's brilliant, and really worked well with him, and really loved working with him. So we had the idea, so how we get Porsche back into Le Mans, and that was the GT1, because we're going to, GT1 was the area that really suited Porsche, and how we could get into GT1 on the way that not develop a complete new car. So we think Dauer homologated a car for the road, a 962. So we started discussing with Dauer and say, look, can we have your homologation? You do the proper homologation. We do it all right at Porsche, but we use your car and your name to go Le Mans, and we could sell that to the board. And then, of course, it was not like we'd raced then against the Jaguar, who was a full Group C car. And we had on paper absolutely no chance. And nobody expected us to win, and they were leading, but we were. And
it was still a riveted aluminium chassis. Was it that old, or was it a carbon?
No. It was an original 962.
Jesus. Okay.
And then we sandbagged during the race to keep the Jaguar a bit slow, and then at a certain time we seen they got some problem, and they didn't take the problem too serious. They go in the pits and have the time. I think they had to change a gearbox, and then we speed it up, and that was with Max, Roland, and me looking at the strategy how we do it, and we speed it up massively, so we could overtake them. Then they thought they were safe.
If they hadn't had the problem, could you have caught them?
No chance. But
No.
we knew there is no chance. Theoretically not. But we knew they had some weak spots. So then we speeded up, and we came into first and second when they went out of the pits again, and then they could overtake our second car. So we won, they came second, and then Eddie Irvine was driving the Jaguar, and I knew Eddie because he was driving once the Super Cup as a VIP driver as well. So and I went after the podium. I went to see him in his caravan. All the drivers had their own caravan, and he was there knocked. He was there in the underwear, and I said, Eddie, just congratulations for the runner-up position. And he jumped after me in his underwear, running through the paddock, and screamed, cheating bastard, cheating bastard.
So this is interesting. You've gone from being an engineer, someone who's just dealing with the technical side of a car. Your career's progressed, and now it sounds like this is politics. You're now really dealing with racing politics. And Dauer, the year Dauer won, is the ultimate example of racing politics. You are really trying to navigate. So this must have been the best possible place to learn what your job is now. Really?
Yeah, it was also when we looked at the Super Cup that. Porsche went out of Formula One, but the idea was then, of course, with Max Welty, we wanted to get Porsche back in Formula One. They said, how we prepare for this? So we can't be completely away from Formula One. So they said, if we have the Super Cup within Formula One, then we are still there, and we are in the heart of Formula One. So working with the organization, being then in the tower and knowing Formula One from an angle that no other team, the Formula One team, have not access to.
Very clever. So was that you that helped define that with Bernie? Was it you?
Yes, I did the deals with Bernie. Max and I did the deals with Bernie, and also for the TV and so to create this. And for that, I also I did the courses. I'm an official FIA race director, I'm official FIA safety delegate, and I'm an official FIA scrutineer. So with that, we got the respect of the Formula One because I had all these certificates. So, and I was like the race director of the Super Cup, but it was raced from the race director with the Formula One. So we looked at the track, what is needed to change to be safe for the Porsches. And also we directed the whole race together. So that gave me an inside view of Formula One that I had to access to the tower anytime.
Yeah.
And normally a Formula One team doesn't have that. So Porsche didn't get back into Formula One then. But I think the Super Cup is now since '93 continuously with Formula One, and it's 30 years this year.
Yeah, it's an amazing legacy. I love the idea that you're an official FIA scrutineer, but you were the person that signed the entry form for the Dower 962 into Le Mans. This is.
I didn't sign it.
So from '94, how much longer did you stay at Porsche? Was that the end of your time there?
No, I stayed until '96.
Okay. So did you do the 993 GT2? Were you involved in that car?
But that was then, after the 964 RS,
Yeah.
that was the first, let's say, RS and performance car done in the race department.
Yes.
So then it became like an own organization.
Yeah.
So this organization in the race department developed these cars. So I was not in charge of the development of those cars.
Okay, you were on the race side.
Yeah.
So you did you do the GT1 then? The first GT1.
On the organization, that
Yes.
was just the starting. When was that? The first year?
96,
97,
97 I think.
So
yeah.
I left end of '96.
Okay. And where did you go to that? Where did you go then?
Then I go to Sauber,
Yep.
but not to the race. But they built up Sauber Petronas Engineering, and Max Welty went from Porsche to Sauber,
Yep.
and they were looking for somebody to build up the Sauber Petronas Engineering.
And this was to create the Silver Arrows that would ultimately become those?
No, that was commercial engineering.
Okay, interesting.
Was commercial engineering, and Petronas, Petronas was the main sponsor of Sauber at that time.
Yep.
And Petronas is a government-owned company, oil company, and Malaysia had the vision 2020. They wanted to be the leading industrial country by 2020 in Southeast Asia. And for them, it was the automotive industry is key to do this. So they had Proton. Proton they had big deals with, was partly owned by Mitsubishi.
And Proton was about to buy Lotus as well, wasn't it? That happened.
They did.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. So but they were not allowed to develop engines. They had to use the Mitsubishi engines. And then we say that that Petronas said, okay, they need engine development and engine technology as well. So they want to say, okay, we are in Formula One with Sauber, so this is the ideal base to develop an engine and develop capabilities for Petronas for engine development. So they created this Sauber Petronas Engineering, and you remember Osamu Goto?
Yeah.
And him and I were the first guys to join and to build up that company. And then we got Malaysian engineers to train in the project and to develop. First we had to do an engine strategy for Malaysia.
Okay.
That was really, I think that was an opportunity once in a lifetime.
Yes.
To create for a nation, to create an engine strategy on an automotive strategy. That was really cool.
Yeah.
And then we developed a four-cylinder aluminium engine, 4-valve, lightweight, because we have to go with something standard but high technology. And we worked together with Yamaha and with Ricardo, and to develop this engine and the prototype, and having the Malaysian engineers in a development program as well. So.
And how did that fit with Mitsubishi then? Did Proton then have to say to Mitsubishi, "We've made our own engine," or had they already agreed that Mitsubishi would let them use their own engine?
No, that was not linked to Proton at that time.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
So it was Petronas. Based for the government.
Okay.
So and that was pretty cool. And then after 18 months.
So you were a civil servant technically, weren't you? Working for a government, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Petronas government company.
Yeah.
But they were really good, and I learned a lot from them. I think that the management there, the CEO.
So actually, did you? Because the man that said earlier that when you were looking to get your ultimate job with Mr. Rocha, you actually had one eye on having money in an Australian bank account, so you could potentially become a sheep farmer. You obviously have a strategic brain. unlike most men, you have the ability to concentrate on one thing and be aware of other things. Most men can't do that. There's a woman in the room who's obviously nodding at the moment, saying, yeah, she totally gets that. So at this stage, are you trying to build the ultimate motoring CV? Because you now have experience of the shop floor, the idea of sitting there and being the person that designs the one component in the engine. You have the experience of this. Then you have the experience of running a race team on a small level. Then you have the experience of a big manufacturer-backed project, which is ultimately a political position. You've made entire road cars, and now you're working for a government to define an entire strategy for motoring in a country. Without realising it, you're creating the ultimate motoring CV. Were you aware of that at the time, or were you just going where your nose took you?
No, I never had also a plan where I go, because if I would have had a plan, how the strategy, what I want to become, I would have never done all this, isn't it? You would have maybe worked through in a company and grow in a company. But I always, as I tried to do the job I had, to do the very best to do this job, and then opportunities come up. And if there's something coming up that it's on highly interest, then say, okay, let's move on and get a different experience and do the very best there. So this is why it added all up with very different things. So I was fascinated by the Malaysians, how they work, how their thinking was, and working with a Muslim company was really interesting, and I learned a lot through that, and it was a very pleasant experience.
How long were you there for?
Yeah, I was there for until 2001, but after 18 months, they did at Sauber. They did like an analysis with an external company what the team has to do to become better in Formula One on the Formula One side, and the result was it has to develop from a traditional race team to an engineering-based and structured company. And then they asked me if I would be interested to do that in addition to the role on the commercial side as the COO for Formula One. So then I agreed to do that in parallel and restructured the whole team. And from 98 to 2001, we came from 8th in the manufacturer championship in Formula One to 4th, to be the best non-factory team without increasing the budget. Just working different and putting the focus different, developing objectives and just creating.
Why do you think? Why I knew that, but obviously I'd let it slip my mind. But why do you think Ford, when your next move goes to Ford Motor Company, why do you think, looking back, they made so little of your incredible experience in the industry? It wasn't until I went looking for your history in automotive. In the automotive industry, that I found it. Ford never told us anything about this. They had this asset.
Didn't know.
Really?
No, for sure they didn't know.
It's incredible.
That was then. I wanted to, I was always more fascinated about performance cars for the road than on racing.
Yeah.
And then after the Sauber time, the engine, the prototype was done. Was all and by the way, the last thing I did at Sauber was a MotoGP engine.
Was it?
Yeah, the 3-cylinder MotoGP engine that was launched in Suzuka in 2001, early 2001, and that became then the Superbike engine. Because when I left, they swapped from MotoGP to Superbike with Fogarty.
Unbelievable.
And that's where I got the offer from Ford, because Martin Leach contacted me and he said, it was Ulrich Betz who contacted me first and said Ford is looking for somebody to re-invite the RS brand and the performance cars again. Would you be interested? And then I had a meeting with Martin Leach in Cologne, and I think the chemistry was right from the first minute.
Yeah.
So then, okay, go back to Germany, this is fine. And at the end of the discussion I had with Martin, when he really sold me that job, then he said, and by the way, it's in the UK.
And you'd never lived in the UK before?
No. So then, okay, it's in the UK, so go to the UK.
And without, I have to ask about your personal life. At this stage, are you married? Do you have kids? Or what? Yeah. So you don't want to uproot your family from Germany, and I presume they're in Germany, are they?
No, my wife is Italian. Okay,
but what about going to? So where was the family home when you had to move to England? Where were you living?
Yeah, in Switzerland.
In Switzerland, okay.
Yeah,
So
Sauber.
yeah,
I
so
was 5 years in Switzerland. So, but we're moving all the time. It was first it was Munich, then it was Stuttgart, around Stuttgart. Then from there it went to Switzerland, and from there to the UK, from there to the US.
did you enjoy the UK?
Yeah, very
Yeah?
much. I love Chelmsford. Yeah.
Yeah, good, because Essex is a curious part of the world. But for those that don't live there, but it's actually it's a good lifestyle, isn't there? And it's quite an affluent part of the country as well. So it's a nice place to live.
I like the people there. I like to work with the English people, and also the social life is. I think it's much more close and respectful than it is in Germany or somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think people help each other much more than anywhere else.
that's interesting.
And I think I got very good friendships in the UK from that time that still last.
So let's look back at that then. That's when I first met you. When this very exciting period when Ford clearly decided it was going to spend some money to build some halo cars to help sell its ordinary cars, to resurrect the RS brand. And that then also meant going rallying with Colin McRae and Delacour and amazing people like that. And it was so exciting. And then when this street car arrived, the Focus RS, I couldn't believe Ford had done it. I still think it's a great car. It didn't, it had its faults, but it was so exciting. It was so much better than any fast Ford I'd ever driven. Is it something you're very proud of now? How does it sit compared to the M3, the 964 RS? Do you consider it alongside those cars, or do you think it's less of an achievement? How do you feel about it now?
When I arrived, the Focus RS was nearly done.
Yep.
Not done,
But nearly.
It needed a good revamp before it could go in production. So I didn't do the concept. So I'm proud of the result. But I'm not like with many of the other cars where I started from the concept and had to sell it to the board. That was done. That was done. So I think we still give it a nice finish and made it really reliable and working for the road. But I don't call that my car because I was not involved from the beginning.
But might be the last time that the Ford Motor Company in Europe would ever really invest in high performance cars, wasn't it? You had Martin Leach, you had a boss who was an enthusiast and wanted Ford to be a company that had excellent vehicle dynamics for performance cars. And I suppose was Richard Parry-Jones still there then, or did he?
Yeah. So I worked very close with Martin and with Richard. So and they were both fantastic.
They're car guys, aren't they?
Oh yeah, it was fantastic to work with them, and I learned so much again from them, from Martin also on the business side. And from Richard on the car side was fantastic.
Did you do this? Did you do the second RS? Did you? Yes.
Yeah.
And that was your car, was it?
Yes, that was from the idea. The first RS was commercially not really. I did a lot for the image, but commercially it was not.
Well, Ford admitted in the interviews with me that every car sold for £25,000 or something, and it cost Ford £33,000 or something. Yeah.
So then being ahead of what SVE it was called at that time, and we called it in Team RS finally, and the board was not interested to do another RS.
Of course.
They never made money with any RS, so I said, okay, we are in the position now in the early 2000s where we can't lose any money. So the ST was quite successful commercially. And I agreed with Martin and say we do an ST Plus, so that Plus sounds be more commercially attractive than an ST. So we got it through the board to do an ST Plus.
And then changed the name.
And then changed it. Said, but really we can't call it ST Plus when it was all approved. Said, what would you call it? I said, actually I would call it RS. So that's the way because RS was a no-go at that time. So then we got it through that we could do
this is your political mind coming out, understanding how to solve problems. So that car, 5 cylinders, it was quite controversial at the time because it was so much power through the front wheels. We didn't think it was possible, but of course the differential and the kinematics of the chassis was so much better than the Gen 1. It could handle the power, couldn't it?
Yeah, it was fun. I think it is as fantastic to drive as a rear-wheel drive, because if you work this well, you can drift with it. You can. It's a special way of driving, But if you use the diff correctly, I think it had so much character.
Yeah, but 5 cylinders is always a great sounding engine as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an interesting car because the latest Focus RS, I say latest, the 4-wheel drive car they made in 2016. Initially, everyone forgot about the 5-cylinder car. They just talked about how great this new car is. But I think now things have calmed down a bit. I would have the 5-cylinder front-wheel drive car. I think it's a sweeter car. It's lighter. It's not corrupted. Yeah. It's a purer driving experience, which is weird because it shouldn't be because it's front-wheel drive, but it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And you never owned one?
No.
Amazing. So
that was that we had to decide what we really do. There was a discussion: do we need 4-wheel drive or front-wheel drive? And but if we would have done 4-wheel drive, we would have been in competition with the Mitsubishis and the Subarus, and we could have not done on the production line a specific car like this. So they say we have to beat them on a different concept. So we have to make the front-wheel drive work because that can be done in a production line.
You've done, just to recap, you've done the E30 M3, the E28 M5, the 964 RS, a couple of Focus RSs. So already your CV is...
The STs.
Yeah, sorry, STs as well. Your CV is off the scale. Next move to America to go and run... What was your exact job title in America?
That was Director SVT.
SVT.
And Director Team RS. So I was in charge of global performance cars. So the STs, RSs, the Mustang Shelby GT500 and the Raptor. So all the US performance cars and the European, because the European cars became global. The challenge there was that the Fiesta was introduced into the US.
Yes.
And the ST was going to the US as well. So we had to develop a global Fiesta ST that is built in 2 plants, but the same car. And it was, you can't have a global performance car. And I always believed you can have a global performance car with the same specs because BMW does it with the M, Porsche does it with the 911s. They don't do different specs. The performance cars sell globally.
What about the Porsche 964 RS America? Do you remember that one? So they did a special 964 because they couldn't sell the RS.
Yeah. And
they sold one in America that was like a Carrera 2 with a thin glass or something. Yeah. That's the only example. I'm being a pedant now, but I think. But the Raptor is the one that stands out for me because was that already ready to go when you got there, or was that?
It was halfway through. So the concept was done and the design was done, but
what year was this?
I went there 2008 and I started 2008. Yeah.
What I find amazing is we'll look back on a period in automotive history. In 2007, the economy slowed down. 2008, Lehman goes bust. The global economy ends. And you might remember, like I do, the 2009 Geneva Motor Show was the most miserable experience of my life. We walk around the Geneva halls and all the performance cars were hidden behind the awnings because all the manufacturers were embarrassed to be thinking of high performance. Everything was about economy, frugal cars. It was just, there was no showing off. It was just so boring. And I thought the performance car was dead. I thought it was dead. I really did. I thought I was preparing to leave the industry. I didn't want to be driving normal hatchbacks. Yeah. And then 2 years later, or whatever, 18 months later, the American manufacturers just go, for want of a better phrase, apeshit. Suddenly, there's just high-performance cars everywhere. How did you manage to do it? These are companies that I know Ford didn't, but these are companies that accepted government bailout money.
Not Ford.
I know, not Ford, I know, but they accepted government bailout money, and they went and made Hemi, V8, everything's. But Ford, I know, didn't take the money, but still, it was incredibly brave to come out with these high-performance cars at a time when you could expect the public to react badly to them. But of course, you got it right. They loved them, didn't they? They couldn't get enough.
US is different, isn't it?
Yeah.
And US is different. And like the Mustang Shelby GT500, they have the Shelbys are done by Shelby.
Yeah.
But the Mustang Shelby GT500 has always been done by Ford.
Yeah.
So, and they were continuous. They were always there, and they were it was evolution. It was not always a new car.
But the Raptor was a very brave idea.
But they had before there was the F-150 Lightning.
Yeah, but that was many years before, and it wasn't an off-road truck. It was a street.
No, that was not an off-road truck.
Yeah.
But then they had the idea to do the F-150 as an off-road performance truck.
How did you feel about? Because I was always fascinated by that. The original drives that we saw, videos, road tests. There were people, of course, they saw a truck with the big Fox suspension and the ride height. Everyone goes and tries to jump them and then bends the frame. This is not Ford. Ford can't be held responsible for a vehicle that can't just do the Baja off the shelf. So do you think Ford was too brave, not saying to people with big sticker on the dashboard saying, don't try and jump this thing 20 feet in the air because it will bend? How did you control that?
You could jump the car.
Yeah.
And when we got then the claims that people put videos on YouTube how then the frame was bent. But then that was not properly jumping, that was abusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you jump it and land on the nose and then smash the back, this is not how you should jump a car. Because we jumped the car. We built a test track in Michigan in the test area, and like a motocross track for the Raptor, and we jumped it. And we built jumps in there. We jumped it 20, 30 meters. And it can take that. If you jump it properly, it can take it. But just if you go over and do not worry, it's the same with a road car. If you go over, do things with a road car that the road car is not supposed to do, yeah, then of course it breaks. And the Raptor will not break if you treat it like you should treat an off-road car.
Yeah.
And what the car can take and what it can't. It's just not a tank.
Just a very brave thing for a car maker to do, because it's one thing warranting a vehicle that's going to stay on the public highway, but trying to warrant a vehicle that you're almost encouraging people to go off-road with is brave, isn't it? It's difficult. It's a difficult area, let's say.
I think the sign-off of the Raptor was a fantastic week. That we went first with the Raptor. First we went to Silver Lake, where on the east of Michigan, at the lake where you have high dunes, you have sand dunes, 200-300 meters. So we did all the sand capability. Then we went into a place that's called Rocks and Valley. So we went rock climbing and there, so to do to prove that the diffs work in a proper way, that you can do really rock climbing with it. And then we went to northern Michigan on a small island. The whole island is an off-road park. And you have mud, like half a meter mud, so that we have the mud capability. And that was an awesome week.
So I'll stop you there. Of all of your testing experiences for all the years, that sounds like a good one. Tell me one from BMW, from Porsche. Tell me one that sticks in your mind where you think that was a great time.
I see, BMW was great. The winter testing was really great.
Was that Arjeplog? Where was that? Up in Sweden, or where would you?
No, it was in the Alps.
Was it?
Yeah, we did that in the Alps. So to go up the passes and was really good. And it was all the ECU settings.
Yes.
At that time, cold start and all that had to be done. And then Nardo, of course. I think Nardo we did average speed with a M5 with 250 k's per hour. That was huge at that time.
Yeah.
That was the mid 80s.
Well, you must have been. No, you weren't at Porsche when Mr. Roche did the McLaren F1 engine, but you must have seen that project, the idea of McLaren going to.
No, I wasn't there when that.
But you must have read about it and thought, what an exciting. I mean, that was incredible. A meeting of Formula One technology with the. Was he the best engine guy you ever met, Mr. Roche? He was?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah.
It seems to me like that his engines. I mean, the engine in the E28 M5, even now, if you were to drive that as a new engine, you'd think it was special.
Yeah, no, he was, he was the best engine guy I ever met, and I'm so proud that I could have worked with him.
What a CV. Okay, so you're in America, you're trying to create a global performance cars for Ford, with quite some success, because let's face it, the Fiesta became very popular in the US, didn't it, straight away?
The Focus ST as well, that had to be built in Michigan.
Yep.
And in St. Louis.
What was it like trying to sell or trying to interest Americans in little hatchbacks? Because it's not what they normally like, is it? The idea of fast little hatchbacks, it's not. But the cars became quite popular quite quickly, didn't they?
Yeah, it was. In the US, I also had I had the job, global motorsport development. global motorsport business development, and especially what to do in the US. And that was then the touring car in China was one makeup in was in India, I think, and also it was how to introduce the Fiesta in the US, making it attractive for the people who love the small hot hatches. And then it was like, do we go stage racing? Do we do one makeup? And
does the name Ken Block come in at any point at this point now?
Yeah, of course. I got Ken Block into Ford, and then I worked in Europe. I supported Andreas Eriksson on rallycross a bit with the Fiesta.
Yeah.
So then my idea was, okay, if something is interesting in small cars in motorsport in the US, it must be rallycross. And then seeing there was the X Games were very prominent. So I thought, okay, go to the X Games, but this was like parallel, it was not racing against each other. So we discussed with ESPN and said, do a tryout, do also like rallycross with the X Games. And I convinced Andreas Eriksson, he always wanted to do Pikes Peak. And I said, I support you in doing Pikes Peak with a rallycross car if the cars stay over for a month and do the X Games as well. So then we did that. We did the Pikes Peak with him in 2009.
Yeah.
And then we did the first X Games in LA. And then Kenny Brack won with the Fiesta. So, and then they tried the next year, they tried to do the really rallycross, and this went big with the X Games then. And that became then an own rallycross series in the US.
Yeah.
And with that, the Fiesta got really, for the enthusiasts, got really on the map, because these cars had 600 horsepower.
How did the marketing department feel about you doing that? Because this, in a traditional car company, that's the marketing department. But what you've done is you've done a fantastically expedient, cost-effective way of totally altering the public's view of a particular car. You've become a marketing manager without them realising it. I presume the marketing department were very defensive because they would never have thought of doing that, would they?
Yeah, they were interested in sponsoring the X Games, isn't it? Because the X Games were quite popular, and still are quite popular with different, and then they supported it because it was the X Games. And the X Games, it's quite youth orientated with the skateboards, with the BMX, and the motocross. So it was the right target group as well. So that's why they supported it. And then I got Tanner Faust in, and I got Ken Block in. So I was trying to get Ken Block. Ken Block always wanted to do WRC. Yep. But with Subaru, he couldn't because they were not in WRC anymore. Yeah. So I offered him. I said, if you join Ford, I get you some WRC events. Yeah. So that's why he left Subaru and joined Ford at that time.
Amazing. God,
and that was big in the US for Ken Block leaving Subaru and joining Ford.
Well, I mean, do you remember the number of memes they would have on all of these special videos of Ken Block's leaving, going from Subaru to Ford? It was big news. Yeah. So how long did you stay at Ford in America for?
Until 2012.
12. And then what was the next move?
That was Volkswagen.
Volkswagen, okay. Yeah.
Because I would have liked to stay in the US a bit more, but finally I wanted to go back to Europe. Yeah. And
were your family with you in America at that point? Yeah, yeah.
And then was like then they approached me from Volkswagen, and I was not really interested.
This was when they were thinking about going to WRC.
They've decided.
They decided.
To WRC.
The decision was already made by the board.
Yeah. Yeah, and they were already rallying with the Skodas in 2012. Yeah. And then so okay, if I don't take this opportunity, you are on the bad side of the whole Volkswagen group, and it's made difficult to go back to Europe. So I decided, okay, yeah, let's do this.
And also,
I tried a couple of times to get out of racing and to be really focusing on performance cars. Yeah. But I was always taken back. That was at Ford again. I joined for the performance cars.
You ended up doing rallycross
and doing up then. Yeah, I became, when Martin Whittaker left, was just 18 months after I joined, I became also motorsport director. So I was in charge of Formula Ford, of the touring car, I was also in charge of the engine program for Jordan, because they had the Cosworth engine, and Cosworth was owned by Ford, and that was named the RS engine. Yep. and also the whole WRC with M Sport. So I always was pulled back. So at a certain point, I said, it doesn't make sense to try to escape. You have to face it.
So you go. Actually, that's an incredible period of WRC because Volkswagen was dominant. And you came back in and you created a car that was so much better than anyone else's. No one stood a chance, did they? It was a really incredible competition car. And also, you've demonstrated circuit racing. You know about motorbikes. Was this your first real foray into running a rally team? Was that your first, or had you done something like that before?
No, we see it went to the Paris-Dakar team. We had an old Paris-Dakar team, a private team.
But actually,
not. And then it was with Ford. I was in charge of the WRC program that was run by M Sport. So I got all the insights and knew what's going on and how to handle it.
So the Polo WRC was a dominant car. Obviously, Mr. Ogier is building up championships. Yeah. Did you enjoy it as an experience compared to sports car racing, compared to your exposure to Formula One, or what did you feel you were there in a period when the sport was in decline a bit with viewing figures? How do you feel about it now?
Yeah, that was the 4 years living the dream. The team was fantastic. We had such a great team, and it was a really great experience. And the sport is really great.
Yeah.
For me, still rallying is the most exciting sport to be in.
What are your thoughts on how rallying can retain its honesty as a sport, but appeal to a younger generation and still be televisable? How does it work?
I developed a strategy how I think rallying could be as exciting as Formula One for TV, and was during the years at Volkswagen.
This was with Red Bull's help, I presume, as well, because they were very interested, weren't they?
Yeah, Red Bull was part of the promoter, so they own 50% or whatever now of the promoter at that time. So it was quite tricky to put it. I had a lot of discussions with the manufacturers, with the drivers, to convince them that we have to do something, and came to a concept that got approved in up to the WRC commission. And then Jean Todt didn't like it because he said it's not the spirit of rallying. And that's why it didn't come through. I'm absolutely convinced if that would have come through, rallying would be now nearly as big as F1.
Because car makers love the fact that rally cars look like stuff you can buy, don't they? It's just, for me, fundamentally, a car that's sliding around that looks like a car you can buy on the street.
And also the proof. You are in -20, -25 on the snow in temperature. You are on high levels, like if you go in Mexico up to 2,000 plus meters. You go on 0 on sea level, and you go in the heat. So you've proven that the same car works in all kind of conditions. Works on tarmac, works on ice, works on gravel. So it shows that the car manufacturer has this experience to make a car reliable on whatever ground, whatever climate conditions and so on.
So as someone who knows motorsport inside out, car companies only really go racing to market their brand. They don't go racing just because they love racing. So do you think rallying is the cleanest expression of that? Because the cars, to me, they look like cars.
Yeah, I think they look like cars, and they are still a lot like cars because of the regulation. You have to have the original body. Of course, you reinforce the body with all the roll cage that is in there, but it's the motorsport. When it started, it was not a marketing tool; it was a development tool.
Yeah.
And then it became more and more a marketing tool. But I still believe it's a lot of a development tool as well as a company does it right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunities to get young engineers into racing. It's not just the technology of it, it's the speed of development, it's the innovation, it is trying new things, and get this mindset into new engineers is a great training ground. And then for engineers going back in mainstream, and bringing this bit of this mindset into mainstream, I think that it's another big advantage that motorsport can offer to manufacture. And that is, I think it's not seen to be as valuable as I believe it is.
Interesting. Right, let's take a very quick break, and then we'll have a short stint afterwards, another 20 minutes or so, and then I'll release Jost. And while we're doing that, go and have a biscuit. I suggest a custard cream maybe this time of day when you're listening. Thank you for listening. Back in a minute. If you have a rare, sporting or iconic vehicle to sell, then contact the Collecting Cars consignment team today and sell with the market leader. And if you're a watch enthusiast, then don't forget to check out the auctions on watchcollecting.com. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your tea break and your custard cream. If you'd moved towards a sort of chocolate bourbon, I can understand, but that's an aggressive move on a Monday morning, as it is here. I'm having a flat white, which is actually extremely strong. We'll talk about the fact that we're sitting in Frank Williams' old office in a minute. This is a room steeped in history. But I want to fast forward now. Jost's career has gone from Ford. He then leaves Ford, goes to Volkswagen, and is in charge of one of the dominant eras in the WRC. Volkswagen then pulls out of WRC, which must have hurt. That you must have not liked that decision. But equally, did you understand it when he won that much? How much more do you have to prove?
No, I didn't understand it. Because when I left Volkswagen to go to McLaren in end of 16, I had the confirmation from the board for another 3 years. So that's I heard, and it was written, that I knew that they would get out, and that's why I left, to escape. But I only left after I had the confirmation from the board that they continue for another 3 years in the new regulations they started in 17, 18, 19. So when the car was fully developed, it would have been even more dominant than the car in the period I was.
And was the car done? Was the car finished?
Completely finished.
So what did you do with it?
Just park it, I think. I was gone then.
But what? So are there finished WRC cars that would have been capable of winning world championships sitting in a garage somewhere in Wolfsburg?
Yeah. And it was through 16. This
was Dieselgate, was it? This was all to do with Dieselgate, or was this before that?
Yeah, of course it has to do with Dieselgate. Was the end of 16.
Yeah.
And I can understand the decision. I don't think it was right, but I can understand the decision.
Sorry, sipping my coffee. So we will brush over the McLaren, the McLaren situation. Just tell me how long you worked at McLaren for that particular.
3 months.
3 months, okay. But obviously, we know, those of us that follow the sport know that there was a big change at McLaren in the racing side of the business, and Ron Dennis left. Jost was a Ron Dennis guy, and in a bit like the way a lion, when it comes into a new pride, clears out all of the children. You obviously you were one of the people that left. And where did you go after that?
Then when I left Volkswagen, then Dies, who runs Volkswagen, he said, Jost, if it doesn't work out, you're always welcome back. And then when...
So you kept how do you keep doors open? How do you leave a company knowing you're pissed off with them for backing out of an agreement, but somehow they let you back in? What's the skill there?
No, because I understood the decision. Fully understand the decision, and I can follow the logic why they had to do this. Yeah, even if I would have done something different, but I really rate these and the Volkswagen management that highly, that I understand their decisions, even if it's not my view.
Yep.
So, and I always kept a good connection with them as well, and I got a good relationship with these on a professional basis. And then when I left McLaren, he says he wants to revamp and making the R brand better. If I would be interested to do that and be head of the R Limited at Volkswagen. So of course that it's performance cars again, and they had created big projects. So there were before I left, we released 7 new models. And that was the biggest. Now they have the biggest R fleet in the showrooms ever.
Yeah,
and that was really exciting.
And good budgets, good time to make the cars. Good team of engineers.
Yeah, it was really good. It was a separate building, separate company outside. and we got all the support. It was close enough to the factory.
Did you do the Golf GTI, or was that
No.
still separate? That was still
that's
separate.
separate,
Yeah.
The GTI is done by the Golf guys, so only the R models are done, and it's R and R line as well. So
Okay.
it's
The higher selling normal cars as well.
yeah.
So you're quite happily back in the performance road car world, and you get a call to say this is Williams.
Yeah, and by the way, I think the latest Golf R is absolute masterpiece.
Yeah.
Everybody who has not driven it should drive it. It's an absolute masterpiece.
The dynamics of the car I love. I struggle with the haptic, all the sort
Yeah,
of,
but we do say what it's R related.
Yeah.
The chassis,
the stuff you can control.
good control.
Yeah.
Yeah, the chassis, the settings.
Yeah.
And if you have you been on the Nürburgring, done the Nürburgring setting?
No.
It's absolutely amazing. That it's something you have to do. The
I
Golf
will.
R with a performance pack and drive it in the specific Nürburgring setting. And it has a drift setting. You can do donuts with the car, and it's just an amazing car.
So how do you feel about? So you're. I mean, obviously, I remember the reason we got back in contact is you phoned me and said we're doing some R event. Can you help out? And about a month later, you have this new job. So you've got a phone call from Williams with the offer of the top job. Did you have to think twice because you were happy doing road cars, or was this a challenge you always wanted to have to run a Formula One team?
No, I had to meet the owners and to discuss with the owners and see what their strategy is, what they have in mind. If that would have been we change the team name, or we are an investment company, just make it efficient and we want to sell it in 2 or 3 years, then I would not have joined. Because I only joined because I've seen the full commitment to be the Williams team and to get back to the top.
So we're sitting
And
here.
then I don't have to think twice.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I was retired
Yeah.
from Volkswagen. I was retired, so I bought my enduro bike back. I raced in '78 to do the European Classic Enduro Championship. So now I gave the enduro bike to an enduro museum in Germany to keep it there for a couple of years.
When you intend to use it again.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here now, and I'll paint a visual picture for you. I mean, an incredible, almost sort of coffin-shaped, huge boardroom table. And this is Sir Frank's, the late Sir Frank Williams's old office, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how does it feel having access to this? I mean, this is a man who was a racing legend.
Yeah,
It must be quite poignant to think that you now occupy this space.
Yeah, but really keep this office clean, and we don't use it a lot. We use it to sign driver contracts, and we use it for very special events like this one. But in general, we leave it as it is, and it's like the holy place within Williams.
So it's a racing team that's achieved so much over its history. We know that in recent years it's really struggled and hasn't had the results that maybe fit what the British public always expected, because Williams became synonymous with almost perpetual success. They were always winning championships. They were always at the top. And then, of course, there were many years when it wasn't so easy. How do you go about rebuilding that success? How do you do it? Do you have to restructure the entire team? Do you have to get entirely new people? It would have seemed for so many people it's a very daunting task.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it needs all the experience from all the jobs I had before to be capable of doing something. Yeah, I think there are a lot of talented people here. It's a good spirit, but if you have a team that has been last for 3 years, it can become a habit.
Yeah.
And it became, okay, we are not good at all. And you've seen there were a lot of financial restrictions why it happened. It's not because the team is bad or the people are bad. There was no investment.
So you have the skill, you have the talent, you just need to reactivate it. Is that what you think?
I think you have to move forward and change all the time.
Yeah.
But and there was from Dalton did a big investment at the end of 19 before the cost cap came in. And end of 19 before the cost cap came in. So, but you have to make this also work. It's not just to invest in new machines and in new infrastructure and just getting better. You have to establish it. You have to get used to work of it, and you have to change the culture as well. And I think
it's interesting that you said you can get used to being last. I think anyone in their professional life can understand that. You can get stuck in a rut, can't you? How do you break out of that? How do you inspire a group of people to not be like that?
I think first you have to get the pride back. Yeah, and you have to get back that if you are in Formula One, there are only 10 teams in the world who are in Formula One, and this is the ultimate motorsport. So if you are there, you are not a nobody. If you are there, you are there, and you should be proud of that and get the pride back and get the spirit back to do decisions.
So how do you think it helps then being called Williams and having this history to refer back to, or do you think it is a hindrance because it's almost daunting to try and become as successful as it once was? Do you think it's a help or a hindrance?
No, I think it's a help. I think it's an absolute need.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody working for Williams is proud about the history, and the history is a major part. But you still have to move forward, and you have to get the spirit back in that made Williams great, and the spirit that was there when Williams was successful. Yeah.
So it's been a very interesting last year because you've had this rising star driving for you, George Russell, who has, he generated so much interest because of his incredible Saturday driving performances. The qualifying, we would see a Williams in a place we didn't expect it, which must have been great for you, but you must have always known at some point he was going to be given the other job by Mercedes. That must have been interesting for you to manage because you couldn't allow the whole thing to be about George. You were clearly giving him a very good car as well, that he could get more from it. How did you manage that? You had this, because for a long time in 2021, George Russell was Williams, wasn't he? For many people who were sort of casual observers, but you knew he was going. You've obviously now filled the seat with an equal talent with Alex. So how did you manage that? You must have been so pleased for the publicity for the team, but equally wary that you knew that was going to end. Yeah,
but as long as it's there, it is there. And I think George is a great team player. And if we have a good relationship with the team, he felt like a Williams guy until the 31st of December.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he is still very close with the team. And he will always be a part of the team, and he will always be proud that he has raced for Williams for 3 years.
Yeah.
And this is having the relationship of the driver and the team that keeps it going, even if you might lose him. So he was still, and we were supporting him in getting the Mercedes seat. Yeah, and I think that is key to that as well. He could be very open and honest to me about it. And he knew he got the support, and nobody would be disappointed, and he would get the same service. He would still be loved as if he would stay. I think that was the basis of the good results in 21.
You've worked now with some truly elite talents. The idea of Sébastien Ogier, George Williams. What is it about these guys and women, I suppose, that make them stand out? What is it that means that Sébastien Ogier can dominate the way he did? What is it about George Russell that means he can pull out a performance from an F1 car that his teammate can't get anywhere near, and everyone's going, wow, how did he manage that? You've seen it as someone that runs the team, you're the boss. What is it about these people?
I wouldn't see that Nicky could have been anywhere near where George was this year. Yep. So there was a couple of times he out-qualified George towards the end of the season. He had a couple of times, it was not his fault that he could not. He had the speed to do it, and it was not his fault that it didn't happen.
Okay.
So he was more unlucky than George was lucky. But for a champion needs luck as well. He needs to be on the lucky side of life, otherwise it will never happen. But he is, I think he is very, I think also the times changed, and how to be a real champion changed in the last 20, 30 years. Yeah, you have to be really egoistic. I think that's a big difference between a top sports car driver who has to share a car and a Formula One driver who just has to make his car its best.
Yeah.
He needs a big ego. He needs to big self-confidence, but on the other hand, he needs to be very sociable. He needs to get the team on his side. He needs everybody working hard for him. and he has to be demanding, but in the right way, that he gets what he wants. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a sort of sociable selfishness is what they need. They need to look after number one, but make sure that everyone around them loves them.
Yeah, and they have to get better under pressure.
That's the thing, isn't it?
I think that they have to get. They have to, let's say, seek the pressure and seek the big challenges.
So we're about to move into a new technical era of Formula One. We know that everyone's talking about the 2022 cars. No one's seen one yet. Is this a leveling of the playing field for Williams? Does this mean that 22 is an easier year because everyone started from the same position? Or do we just have the same problems we've always had in Formula One, which is Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull have so much money that they will always be able to start with a new set of regulations further up than a team like Williams because they have more money? How does it work, do you think?
No, you have the cost cap in place since last year. But the concept of the 22 car started earlier, of course. It's very difficult to say. Well, say the teams who had a fantastic car up to now, for sure they're capable to do a fantastic car as well. And the teams who had the problems to do a good car might have it's not that easy for them to do a brilliant car as it is for the guys who had a brilliant car. And I think the level field, the investments have been different for the big teams in the past years. Even with the cost cap coming in, these investments pay off.
Yeah.
So I think the cost cap is important, but it's leveling out over the next 5 to 10 years. It's not you put a cost cap in and then it's a equal playing field. That it's not the case. But of course it gives the chance to the teams to come closer. But it's completely unknown, isn't it? It's nobody knows. I only know how our car looks.
Are you excited?
I have no idea.
Are you excited for that first time that you run the car? Presumably it'll be Barcelona or maybe somewhere in the UK. I don't know. Are you excited to have that moment where one of your drivers says, "Wow, we've got something here"?
Yeah, if he says this, then it's fine. Yeah. If he says the opposite, it's a bit different.
Yeah.
I think for next year, it's more about the development speed, how the team is prepared, and how the team can do changes.
What do you think the average lap time reduction will be over the year? Do you think it will be dramatic? Do you think the cars will be 3 seconds a lap quicker by the end of the year than they were at the start on the same track?
It's impossible to say right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think they will be as much slower as it's published.
Yeah.
I think there will be less. So, but it's more to do a proper job, do a solid job, and then develop the car from wherever you started from.
How did you politically manage to navigate your way through the idea that you have Williams is a team that uses a Mercedes engine, and you now have a very publicly ex-Red Bull driver coming to drive for you who is part of the Red Bull family? How on earth do you navigate that? That almost seems like an impossible situation to deal with.
But I don't know. I said it was easier than everybody believes. I have a good relationship with Red Bull.
Yeah.
Because I worked with Red Bull in the Sauber times a lot, so I know Mateschitz personally quite well. So, and they were the main sponsor at Volkswagen for the rally program. I know these guys. I had a good relationship with them, and also with Dr. Marco. Then when Jost Verstappen, I gave him the engine package to get into Formula 3 with Amos Ford. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone in Formula 3 at that year.
Yeah.
So, and then he got straight into Red Bull after a couple of Formula 3 races, and I discussed that with Marco. So I have a good relationship with Red Bull. So they trust me, and I have a good relationship with Toto as well, because we were in charge when I was at Volkswagen and he was at Mercedes. We both had to run Formula 3 in the proper way, and we got Formula 3 up to where it got to at the end together. So I have a trust relationship with Red Bull side, and I have that with on the Mercedes side. And I think they both trust me as well, so that we handle it in a proper way that it doesn't damage either Red Bull or Mercedes or any of their competition issues.
Yeah.
I think that is where, I think that's how it could happen.
If we drew a Venn diagram of the people capable of navigating that particular situation, I think we can safely say you're the only person on the planet that probably could have done that. It's an incredible feat. I want to talk to you about a less...
At the time, I felt like a tennis ball being...
I can only imagine how that felt. I want to talk to you about a less savoury thing now. So, Williams was in the spotlight in the last race in Abu Dhabi for less fortunate reasons. Nicholas ultimately, an oversteer moment for him changed the course of racing history, and we now know that he suffered some appalling, disgusting abuse online. What are your thoughts on that? How do you help a young driver deal with something that's so awful, that is so undeserved? How do you feel about it?
Of course, everybody feels bad about it, and it's really completely unfair. You have a young guy fighting for position in a race, and during overtaking, he gets on the dirt spot, and then he gets an oversteer and crashes the car, in where he's just wants to do his very best for the team and for his result, and has nothing else in mind. And whatever the crash caused was never in his mind, and it was not intended. And this thing was a racing accident that was in a fight in the race. What the spectators want to see. The spectators go to racing because they want to see fights for positions. And you can't blame a young driver who is doing that, or any driver, or else an experienced driver is doing that. And if you are in that focused and concentrated, then things can go wrong. And if things go wrong, this is a race accident. And then blaming him for what happened then thereafter, I think is completely out of context. And you see what that can make to a driver's mind. It's very bad. It can be extremely bad. I think that Nicky reacted very professionally, in a very positive way, and I think his response he posted after a couple of days, and it's good he waited to calm the situation down, and I think it was spot on timing and spot on the text what he said, and I think if that helps to understand the situation for many people a bit better, then he feels also okay about it, because he could do something good for somebody else in the future, not to suffer what he suffered.
Yeah, I think you handled it very well. The idea of a very calm statement, I feel, is after the event. I was always told by many people when I'd get a bit of abuse, they said, well, why do you look at it? It's not so easy as that. If you're engaged with the outside world, you can't then just shut yourself off, because you become a hermit. You can't do that. Yeah. You can't unsee things. So I hope he's going to come back stronger and build on that and use it to make himself an even better driver. And you were quite right. I wasn't being dismissive of him relative to George's performances last year, because I want to say that at the end of the year, he was getting much closer, wasn't he? He was, and his race performances were always much closer than people ever gave him credit for, because they'd always remembered the George Russell qualifying performances.
Yeah.
So you've got a strong driver lineup this year. You really do, don't you, with Alex as well?
Yeah, I think Nicky had a very difficult time. His rookie year was in 20.
Yeah.
What was the main was Corona affected, and it was a very strange year.
Yeah.
And if you come in as a rookie in that year where everything changes and where he has to focus so much more on every single race than anybody else, because everything is new for him, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And then, say, the last year was the first really regular season for him, and he developed very well through the season. And he deserves the drive. There is no doubt.
Okay, now I have to ask you, what went on at Abu Dhabi? Do you think the sport will just continue without people reflecting on it? Do you think it was the right decisions were made, the wrong decisions were made? Would you rather say nothing about it? Come on, I can't believe you don't have an opinion about what happened in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I've seen it on TV because I was at
One of your COVID incidents.
Exactly. I worked from home. But if you are not there, of course you have a different view because you see it from the distance. Yeah, and I know Masi quite well. I met him a couple of times. I had discussions with him. I had discussions with the stewards. Most of the racing stewards, of the ex-racing drivers, I know. And I had quite a lot of discussions, especially with Emanuele Pero. So I know him for 40 years now. And at discussions, what are the problems? What are the issues? What are the difficulties the stewards and Masi have to go through during a race? And I see it's very, very difficult. Yeah. But to see how they handle it, I think they handle it very well for what's going on. And also Masi is very professional, and he always has I don't believe anybody in the FIA of the stewards prefer at any time any team or any driver. That I'm absolutely 1000% sure about. You have to take the decisions quite quickly and immediate, and whoever has been in that decision and is seen by millions or billions of people live at the same time, it's a huge pressure. And I believe they have handled it very well. What I think is not right, and I think that it's what also the people involved, is that there can be a conversation with the team principals or anybody with the team, with the race director during the race.
The way and to broadcast it as well for people to hear it.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I think the broadcast is not the issue. I think that the conversation itself, it's the same as when you look at football, that the coach is discussing during the match with the referee. The referee's
word should be final. They tell people what to do, and those people do it.
It's final, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And also, these decisions during the race should not be able to be protested in or to look in at the back. If you have a football match and there is a penalty, the penalty will not be taken away after the match if it seems that it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that has to be clarified by the rules.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I think has to be done. The rest, I think it's, you had these situations through the year where the championship could have been in a different position before the last race.
Yeah.
Easily. And it leads to this. And if you have this kind of tension, then things happen.
It's an interesting cultural position as well, because the idea of a car being so far ahead for a race, for the entirety of a race, and then there being a safety car period that closes everyone up, and then the car that was clearly outperformed during the race, and Max was outperformed, then goes on to win. Of course, that's the basis of NASCAR, isn't it? That is how NASCAR works. You end up with, you wait for the safety car situations, and then when it goes green again, quite almost always the car that wins isn't the car that was fastest during the race.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Western racing, the idea of European racing, finds that so difficult to stomach. But American racing almost embraces that, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's the same principle all year. If you go through all year when there was a safety car and the gaps get closed, this is what happens with a safety car. Yeah? And it's the only solution. You can't reinstall the gaps after a safety car. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that is in the nature of racing.
Yeah.
And if it happens at the end of the championship, where the points are the same of the two drivers, and it happens and changes then the race result, it's life, isn't it? And you can't talk about is it fair or unfair.
I think for you, and I've raced for 20-something years, and racing is your life. For those of us that have raced, it is life, because I think you can safely say that the number of times that you have lost out and the number of times you've gained from those situations is always it always pans out. It's the
balanced,
same.
Yeah.
But if you've just come into Formula One, with the Drive to Survive, Netflix, and you think you're in this new sport you've not seen before, you don't understand it. You look at it and think, how did that happen? I think this is what's interesting.
Yeah,
They can't be as philosophical as you, because they think it's unfair the way that Lewis has lost out. But of course, Lewis, he knows in his head that he probably won a championship because Timo Glock changed position. He knows how precarious his first championship was. It still must have been very painful for him. But how many times has he won a race and benefited from a similar situation? Maybe just as many.
Yeah, I would say, this is like life. If you say sport is absolutely fair, what is fair? Is life fair? Life isn't fair all the time, isn't it? And what is fair? It's quite difficult. I think Masi did it very well under the pressure he was and the decisions he had taken. He wanted the championship to be decided without anybody else being involved. Yeah. This is why he let these cars through.
Yeah.
Because he said they are first and second. They were first and second before the safety car, so they should be in that position to decide on the championship. It's fully understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everything was according to rules that are in place. Yeah, as I understand it. So it's. I think nobody can say that Max would not deserve the title for last year.
That's really point. I agree with you. He is a deserving champion. He won the most races during the year. His driving was extraordinary. One of the two of them was going to win, and it was settled in an unconventional way.
Yeah.
But how many championships throughout all motorsport get settled in an unconventional way? So many. Look at if you would take a global view of every form of motorsport, there's always something like this going on, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's if it would have changed the championship that somebody which clearly wouldn't have deserved it would have won, it would be a different situation. But with those two drivers, both deserved to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mercedes still got the manufacturer's title. So it's. I think it goes back, and when we in a couple of years we will look back and say it was a very exciting Formula One season.
Oh, absolutely. So Williams in 22. What's your aim? Do you keep it modest and quiet, or do you say that you want to reach Q3 10 times? What's your goal in your head or specified for the team?
It's difficult to put it on positions because nobody knows what they are. Somebody might come up with a different solution that is outperforming everybody. Maybe 3 teams have that. You don't know.
Yeah.
I think the objective has to be to improve during the season.
Yeah.
To have a better car competitive-wise in the field at the end of the season than the beginning of the season. So it's now a start of a new regulation for a couple of years. So it's to understand the car, overtake some of the competition during the development phases, then come with a better car in 23 and have a continuous improvement through the field, wherever it starts off. If we start being the 9th, 10th fastest car, or being the 3rd, 4th fastest car, nobody knows. But you still have to have this continuous improvement.
One question: the 15-inch tyre. How do you feel about that?
The 18-inch.
It's 18-inch now, is it?
Yeah.
God. Okay, there you go. I'm off the pace. So 18 inches. How does this profoundly? I mean, it's such a big technical change. Do you think it's the right thing to do? Do you think it's too big a change in terms of diameter, a bigger leap? How does it work? Because it's going to alter the performance of the cars quite radically.
Yeah,
isn't
but
it?
I don't really mind if it's the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Then it's fine, isn't it? It's the tires are heavier, or the wheels are heavier.
Yeah.
So it needs a different training for the pit crew to change the tires. It's more demanding to change the tires, so it needs slightly different processes, but it's part of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think the cars look more modern when they have, because the road cars are going to bigger diameters wheels.
Yeah.
So I think it's the right way to go.
We'll finish on that note. Thank you very much for your time, Jost. That was a bit of a marathon. I apologise to you. Hopefully you can go.
Thank you, Chris.
Let your
No,
voice
it's
recover.
fine.
But so we've gone from E30 M3 air exchange within the cylinder and defining the valve sizes and of an S14 engine to running a Formula One team. Your modesty makes me always think that you almost willfully forget how much you've done, but it's a remarkable career, and I really hope that it continues, and I hope that you end up behind your head there's some significant silverware for the team, and I hope that you get some more of that in 2022. Thank you for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, and thanks for all the interest of your listeners. It's always a pleasure to work with you and to talk to you, Chris.
Cheers, boss.